You know, in January, when we embarked upon the idea of making the Innocence Project the Law Day event, we did it because our committee felt and our board felt that we wanted this year, on the 50th anniversary of Law Day, to celebrate something that was about justice, something that was about today, something that was relevant. And I think initially I had to do a little coaxing to get people to understand what the Innocence Project was, but it did not take a lot of coaxing, and it did not, has not taken a lot of coaxing for all of you who have shown up here today to come, because it is such an incredible organization. I knew that I hit the mark as far as relevance was concerned when yesterday I picked up the Utica paper, and the main headline, the lead story on the front page with a banner headline, was about DNA tests being conducted through the efforts of the Innocence Project in New York. I knew that I hit the mark when I realized that story continued on to a full page inside the paper, and opposite that page was an article about a fellow by the name, I think it's James Woodard, who was this past week released from prison in Texas after spending 27 years in prison. He was released, exonerated, declared an innocent man after spending 27 years for a crime he had not committed. These are tragic stories. These are human stories. These are about 216 people that the Innocence Project has been responsible for obtaining the exoneration of in the past 17 years. And so it was thrilling for me to invite for our Law Day Maddy deLone, the Executive Director of the Innocence Project, as our guest. When we contacted the Innocence Project in January looking for a representative from that organization to be a keynote speaker, Maddy responded virtually within minutes of our request that she would be delighted to come to Utica to speak. You can't imagine how thrilled we were and how more thrilled we are today. Since then, she and her staff have communicated regularly on how we can make this Law Day what Law Day is intended to be, an event that celebrates and promotes a better understanding of the law and justice. You know, our system of justice in this country is one of the best in the world, but it is not without flaws and imperfections. Today we focus on wrongful convictions. The thought that you can be accused of a crime you had nothing to do with is at best unnerving. The idea that you can actually be convicted of that crime and sent to prison for the rest of your life is mind-boggling and horrifying. It's a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Maddy deLone is a graduate of Radcliffe College, where she studied biological anthropology. She went on to receive a master's degree in public health at Harvard. After about 10 years of working in jails and public health in New York City, including positions at the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Health and Hospitals Corporation, the Board of Correction, which is an oversight agency for the city jails in New York City, and as a clinic administrator at Rikers Island, Maddy went to New York University Law School, where in 1994 she earned her JD degree. After graduating from NYU, Maddy worked as a civil rights attorney at Children's Rights Incorporated and at the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. She joined the Innocence Project as its executive director in March of 2004. In an interview in 2005, Maddy was asked what inspired her to go to law school. She replied that she had worked as a health administrator on Rikers Island and at Spofford, New York Secure Juvenile Detention Facility, and that she developed and tried to enforce standards for conditions of confinement in the city jails. She said, "I learned two things. First, these institutions are very damaging and harm everyone connected with them, prisoners, security staff, and civilian staff, including health professionals. Second, I learned how useful the law could be in changing the unconstitutional conditions that people were subjected to in jails and prisons in this country. I went to law school hoping to better be able to work to change these institutions. Maddy's life and career has been focused on identifying and understanding unjust conditions within our justice system and working to change these injustices. It is therefore no wonder that she ended up at the Innocence Project. In one moment, it's my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Maddy deLone. But before doing so, Maddy will be introducing our guest speaker, our other guest speaker today, Roy Brown. Roy Brown, as most of you probably know from the literature, spent 15 years in prison for a murder he did not commit, for a murder that someone else who has been identified committed. This morning we had a panel discussion at the school from 9:15 actually until 11:45. 120 of our students, all who are attending this afternoon, were there. It was, to me, one of the most moving sessions I've ever been. We listened to Roy Brown tell his story, and you will in a moment. But one of the things that really struck me was how moved the students were. So much that one of the high school students, during the question and answer period, stood up and said, "Mr. Brown, I want to tell you that you are an inspiration to me. You are a hero." With pleasure, I introduce first Maddy deLone, Executive Director of the Innocence Project.
Thank you very much, Larry. I'll say that, Larry, you chose him well when you made him your president and when you made him in charge of the program today for Law Day. He was vigilant, persistent, constant information, a back and forth, really trying to figure out with us what was the best thing we could do to make this morning as useful, helpful, and interesting to the students as it could be. And they were terrific, and it was a wonderful day. And everybody that invites us to participate in the program should be 1/4 as good as you are, and I would go anywhere. So I'm really delighted to be here. I thought really what made sense to start with today was really to start with Roy Brown's story. And there's no one better to tell it than Roy. I think the student had it right this morning. He is a hero. Larry mentioned there are 216 men and women across this country who have been freed by DNA evidence after serving an average of 12 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. And each and every one of them inspires us every single day and makes it a joy and a privilege to go to work. So I'll come back and say some other things about what we found and what we've learned and what we hope we can all do together, particularly here in New York State. But I'm going to introduce Roy Brown.